Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to introduce our new solution for solving the thorny issue of attributing across the walled gardens. It's already working on a few clients and we can share some initial results with you today. I'll quickly start with some personal introductions. I'm Phil Spencer, General Manager at ScanmarQED and based in the UK. Joining me today is Pavel Sima, who is the Global Lead for Rolvenue, who recently joined the ScanmarQED group. And finally, we're very happy to be joined by Tomasz Czykowski from Expondo, who can share some of his experience.
Yeah, so Phil, thanks for the welcome, and I'm happy to be here, and even happier that we can talk about this new capability, which we really think is a game changer in terms of how investments into walled gardens can be evaluated. This feature has gotten great response from our clients so far, and so I'm really stoked to be here and talk more about it today with our audience.
Great. A small bit of housekeeping. So there will be a Q&A session at the end, but please do use the chat function to submit questions throughout, and we'll keep an eye on that. So to kick things off, I'd like to quickly introduce ScanmarQED. We are a marketing technology company focused on automating the analysis of data to help clients make better decisions. So some of you may know us, and we are best known for our marketing mix modeling platform and our marketing data management platform. But we are delighted to add Rolvenue to our portfolio towards the end of last year, and a multi-touch attribution solution. So I'd now like to hand over to Pavel, who can explain more about what Rolvenue actually do and take you through the details of this latest innovation. Over to you, Pavel.
Thanks, Phil. Right, so Rolvenue is one of the pioneers in data-driven attribution, and since 2015 we have gone through a range of upgrades and innovations. But it has always been central to us to provide the best picture about the true ROI of all digital activities and offer a way to our clients on how to take insights into practice and how to increase revenue and ROI. And we have done that for a range of advertisers, obviously, but also agencies, so working with both advertising agencies globally. Now, how do we do that in a nutshell? So we collect and connect data from 3 different data type sources, which is ad platforms, web analytics, and internal systems of the advertisers. And then once the data is in and connected, we run our machine learning recurring neural nets on it to determine the true contribution of each touch point, and then clients can work with the results both in the front end of our app or in the exports of various destinations. So whether they prefer their favorite BI solution like a Tableau or Power BI, or it could be exported to Google Sheet, a data lake, or anywhere else. So this is what we have been doing ever since 2015. But today we are actually improving the process a lot, which brings us to the agenda for the webinar today. So first, we want to talk about how have the impressions been eluding us now, and how we actually ended up in a situation where they are escaping tracking and evaluation, and what kind of problem this causes to advertisers and analysts. Then we would like to talk a bit about the synthetic impressions, which is our new innovation, how it works exactly, and what benefits it brings to marketers. And we are also very happy that we are not only going to talk about theoretical concepts, but also real numbers, as we have a case study with a retailer. And then towards the end, also a short info about how you can get your hands on this new feature. And we would try to fit everything within more or less 30 minutes so that there's also enough room for a Q&A towards the end of the session. You can already ask the questions now and throughout the session in the little chat window in the bottom right corner. However, we will answer those questions at the end of the session. So how did we get here? By now, tracking is a fairly developed discipline, with Google Analytics being launched already in 2005 and first attribution platforms shortly afterwards, 4 years later. And social media advertising is nothing new under the sun either. Snapchat, for instance, was founded in 2011, obviously Facebook even way earlier, nor is the dominance of Facebook, which already in 2015 was scooping 10% of global digital ad revenue. And with that number obviously growing to the 30 to 40% mark where it is today. The most notable and relevant event, however, to today's discussion, at least, was when Cambridge Analytica scandal broke in 2018, and that has consequently caused Facebook to close off to third-party services like Rolvenue, for instance, with the data that they can provide. And with other platforms following suit shortly afterwards, this has really changed the tracking landscape forever. And it has left advertisers scrambling for any good answers for the past 5 years. Until February of this year, that is, when we launched the synthetic impressions feature that we are here to talk about today. But before we dive into that game-changing news, maybe it's good to explain why this has caused such headache to advertisers, marketers, and analysts alike. You see, there are 3 main types of data that any attribution model can utilize. The first is clicks. Clicks for customer journeys can be easily obtained from Google Analytics or other web analytics tools, or even via a proprietary tracking. Clicks are typically sufficient for most performance types of advertising. So they can be search advertising, represented by Google Ads, for instance, retargeting, represented by Criteo, for instance, or affiliates with the likes of Avon and others. So far, so good. For more upper funnel activities, which is mainly video and display, you really want to enhance your customer journey data also with impressions. And that has been possible to do with some DSPs that are so-called open, meaning that they allow tracking and can provide row-level data about every single impression. To a stark contrast to that are walled gardens, and most notorious of which is Facebook. But it's also Snapchat, it's also Pinterest, TikTok, and other social media. And quite frankly, not only social media, for most advertisers who don't get special treatment, also YouTube and Google Display Network, for instance, effectively behave as walled gardens. And all of these platforms simply don't share the raw, or as we sometimes call them, user-level data with advertisers or third-party analytical services like Rolvenue. Now, why is that such an issue? Let me here on this slide familiarize you a little bit with an example of a customer journey that we will be using throughout this presentation. So as you can see here, we have a customer journey that starts with a Facebook impression on mobile. Later on, there is a TikTok impression on mobile. Even later, there is, again, a Facebook impression, but now on desktop. Later on, the customer goes to search and clicks on a search ad within GA ads, and then even later is retargeted and clicks on a retargeting banner ad, for instance, served by Criteo, and then finally converts. Now, if we use just click-based attribution, we are in effect overrepresenting performance channels, and we have little to no way of assigning credit to more upper funnel display ads, as you can see in this example. So if the customer buys for a product for, let's say, 100 euros or $100, we, in this example, with click-based attribution, would give $40 of revenue towards Criteo and $60 to Google Ads and $0 to Facebook and TikTok, which really is not ideal, right? And which also leaves questions of how can advertisers currently even evaluate the performance of walled gardens? And the answer, unfortunately, is that they don't really have good answers or tools to arrive at them, for that matter. So let's take Facebook as an example. When evaluating performance of Facebook or Instagram ads, any marketer or analyst basically has 3 options. The first is to use last week data from Google Analytics, but that would typically give Facebook the least credit. A bit more sophisticated advertisers and analysts would use data-driven attribution models that are based on clicks, which would typically a little bit adjust the results versus last click data in favor of Facebook. However, in both of these approaches, still they would arrive at an unrealistically low ROI estimates for Facebook campaigns. So what else is there to do? The third option is then to rely on Facebook attribution, or simply what Facebook Business Manager self-reports about the performance of Facebook campaigns. That, on the other hand, gives you, as you can imagine, unrealistically high, and at least from my point of view, completely inflated numbers about Facebook contribution. So marketers at the end of the day know that the truth lies somewhere between the DDA click-based attribution and the Facebook self-reported results. But the problem is that this range, which you can see on the screen, is still very wide. Just to give you an idea how wide that can be, with some clients, these two numbers can differ by as much as a staggering 5,000%. So, even though it's 2023, at the end, we basically still don't know the Facebook performance. And marketers therefore need to guess. And as a result, they need to set different ROAS or ROI levels for Facebook and different for other performance channels, which is very annoying both to them and their management, which you will also hear, I think, shortly from our guest speaker, Thomas. Maybe you're wondering now, how can such a discrepancy of 5,000% even occur? And it all comes down to how everything is being tracked. So let's have a look at a single example. Here you can see we have a customer A who sees an ad on his phone, both on Facebook and TikTok for the same product. And later on, the customer doesn't click on those ads. He only sees them. So it's only seeing the impressions. Now, later on, the customer A goes directly to the website of the retailer on a PC and makes a $100 worth of purchase at 4 p.m. Now, information about these transactions is sent to all of these ad platforms and also the RP of the client, of the advertiser, and wherever Rolvenue is part of the stack, also to Rolvenue. Now, let's consider what every platform can actually quote unquote see. In other words, how do they interpret what actually has happened in this particular example? So both Facebook and TikTok, they know that they served some impressions to this user, and then later on, a conversion happened, a conversion occurred. So they think, and they also report to the advertiser that they are solely responsible for 100% of that conversion, which is wrong, by the way. On the other hand, we have Google Analytics, and they know that actually the conversion came via a direct visit to the website. But on the other hand, they don't know anything about those preceding impressions. So now Google Analytics thinks that the user came from direct and immediately purchased, which is also incorrect. So what we can do about that? Well, if we plug in Rolvenue Synthetic Impression solution, this is what happens. We can actually see both. So we know that according to Facebook and TikTok, there was a $100 worth of order at 4 p.m. that these both of these platforms claim was theirs. And then from GA, we also know that there was this other order that was assigned to direct. And then we can sort of assume that this is likely the same order, and then we can actually generate a synthetic impression touch point both for Facebook and TikTok, which is precisely the reason why we are then able to assign credit even to all of those impressions, which is frankly what everybody wants to see in an ideal world at the end of the day. And exactly also why we have came up with these synthetic impressions innovation. So in this particular example, at the end of the day, what we want to do is to arrive at this hypothetical solution where we would assign $21 to Criteo, $49 to Google Ads, $13 to TikTok, and the rest, the remaining 17 to Facebook, which would be the most precise way to go around about this. So, today I'm very happy to introduce our new synthetic impressions methodology. And it is really the solution so many people have been waiting for so long. And quite frankly, one of our most important releases that we've done in the past 2 to 3 years. And why have marketers been waiting so much for this is because currently all they have is a bunch of disparate data sets. And such a situation doesn't allow them to properly evaluate true ROI of upper funnel activities. It's as simple as that. And that's why we devised this method of synthetic impressions that allows us to combine impression data from all platforms with web analytics data into a single customer journey, so that impressions can also compete for credit within the data-driven attribution model. And then marketers can finally evaluate contribution of those display and video activities they run within walled gardens. And suffice to say, those are sometimes pretty significant chunks of their overall budgets, if not even the majority. And that is and has been and remains a real pain. So before we dive into how that exactly works, I would like to now give or invite on the stage Thomas from our German client Expondo here to talk about a bit how these theoretical concepts that I've been talking about so far affect real life work of marketers and analysts. But before I give word to him, maybe also a bit of an intro to Expondo. So Expondo is a leading e-tailer in the segment of professional gastronomy, serving restaurants and chefs with high quality equipment. And they're actually active on 19 markets, and together they use a mind-blowing 100 different ad platforms to reach their audiences. And Thomas is personally overseeing the evaluation, and he puts his head, sort of to speak, on the table for delivering returns on budgets for all these advertising activities. So Thomas, welcome here, and tell us please, what is really Expondo's situation and how much of a problem or headache, if you will, have walled gardens caused you so far?
Hello everyone, thanks for introduction. So from my side, it looks like that we focus on the niche product, the gastronomy. We need to be present in many countries and on many platforms. And Facebook is important platform for us as our audience is a little bit older and is also on Facebook. So far, we've been going through difficult times with assessing the effectiveness of this channel, and Facebook effectiveness was really below the average, and therefore we needed to reduce the budget compared to 2021 and 2022 because we didn't want to overspend the money and we need to have a closer look on ROI.
Right. So that is quite unfortunate, right? When you need to decrease budgets always. But can you tell us maybe a little bit more about how do you measure or had you measured up until recently the ROI so that you could evaluate really the effectiveness?
So we've been using Rolvenue as our attribution tool. And on top of that, we also add the data from our order management system. So we have the data regarding the margins, and we can assign the value of the campaigns based on this data. Unfortunately, so far we've been doing it on using only clicks in data-driven attribution model.
Right, which, as we know, or as we established, is not really ideal. So you were saying, Thomas, that you needed to cut down on your budget. Let me ask you, was this a constraint put on you by your management? And can you tell us maybe by how much did you need to cut this year on your social media budget?
Yeah, with so tight budget, we needed to cut down the spend and by nearly a half of it for the social media. So
right.
Significant part.
And that was something that came from above, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we cannot
okay. Yeah, so thank you, Thomas. We will come back to you once again at the end, also to hear not only about the pain, but also the results that these synthetic impressions now is allowing you to do. So thank you for now.
Thanks.
And, you know, with that, I would like to finally expand a bit on how the actual solution works from the technical side of things. So, you know, maybe the analytical types among you listeners, I guess now is the time to ask a lot of questions. And for the rest of you, please bear with me for 5 minutes. If you cannot bear it, maybe go make your coffee or something and then come back for the case study. Just joking. I actually think it's actually quite intriguing to know how this works, because our product team came up with something quite ingenious. So let's have a closer look of what's happening here. As we already established, there is some sort of customer journey that's being tracked by different platforms at the same time. Now, these platforms are tracking it because all of them, they would have a tracking pixel put on the advertiser's website. And then Rolvenue would be pulling data from the APIs of these platforms, and we would add which is the new part, we are adding a pairing algorithm that connects these disparate customer journeys into one. And then based on that, we can actually insert synthetic impressions into the customer journeys. And lastly, at the end of this whole process, we then apply our Rolvenue AI data-driven attribution algorithm, which determines the contribution of each touch point, regardless if it's an impression or click. So once more, and let me focus a little bit more on each part of this stage. So first, we're collecting data, and you know, as we said, Facebook collects the data separately, TikTok separately, Google Analytics separately. But then what we have really done now is that we are downloading data from these APIs, and even more data in a more granular way than ever before. So the goal here is to really get as granular as possible, which then allows us to see which conversions actually belong to each other. And let me give you an example. So imagine that typically there would be only one conversion worth of $100 in a certain hour of a day from a certain campaign and certain ad group. And if that is the case, then we can match it actually together. And if there's only one conversion that shares all of these same data points from both sides, all of these parameters, then we can be very sure that it's the same one. If there's two or more, we use other cues to guess which one it is. And actually, in this fashion, we are able to match typically 60 or even more % of these conversions deterministically, where we're very sure that this actually is the same conversion, and the rest of them probabilistically. And then, obviously, what happened next is then whenever we can find the match, we input the synthetic impressions into the journey, which is here denoted by the green color. So those are the impressions that we are inputting artificially, so to say, into the already existing customer journey from clicks that we know from Google Analytics. And then lastly, as I already said, then the attribution happens, and you know, our machine learning learns from all of these customer journeys, all of these impressions and clicks, and assesses what credit should be given to all of these touch points. So what does this whole diagram and processing and the algos that it represents then results into? As we already mentioned, the end result typically lies somewhere between the DDA click-based model and the Facebook attribution or self-reported result by Facebook. And suffice to say, it typically is closer to the DDA click-based rather than to the inflated numbers of Facebook itself. Now, to sum it up, we believe that this really is not only the only way to properly assess performance from all the walled gardens, but also the most future-proof one, as it doesn't really rely on third-party cookies. It's also one that's very easy to implement, as we don't need to include any additional tracking pixels. And to a certain extent, it put us also a bit further on a path of solving cross-device tracking problems, as the platforms like Facebook use and require persistent logins on all devices, and hence they know exactly on which devices the users see what kind of ads. And finally, and to me maybe most importantly, marketers no longer need to have different ROI levels or ROI ceilings for performance and display activities. So one for performance and one for display, which if you want to have one takeaway from all this, I would be very, very happy, and I'd wish that it would be this one. And I didn't forget, we also promised a case study, right? So the idea here is that we really want to show you not only typical results, but also real life numbers. And at the same time, we thought it would be good to combine it also with GA4 data-driven attribution model results, as that is kind of a hot topic currently being discussed in the market and in the industry. So I need to thank here to our long-term client DataArt for agreeing to share their data here. DataArt as a company is a leading retailer of hardware and electronics, and also very much an omnichannel player with lots of brick and mortar as well as e-commerce presence. And as such, DataArt has very long and complex customer journeys that also differ a lot by product categories. And since we wanted to be fair here today, we would like to list both pros and cons of the GA4 DDA model. And in this case study, we have looked at different channels and channel types and looked at both GA4 DDA model and our own model that includes synthetic impressions. And as a baseline here, we use last click GA results. As you can see, the positives here are that GA in this case does not overvalue Google Ads as compared to last click. Needless to say, this is already done in Google Ads, which uses a completely different attribution model altogether. The other positive here is that it does seem to not discriminate one particular channel. But you can already start to see that it gives lower credit to walled gardens than last click, which becomes even more apparent where we include also Rolvenue Synthetic Impressions results denoted here by the red color. And here I also want you to pay a close attention to the x-axis values, as we needed to break the bar that would have otherwise escaped the screen, because we actually assign 375% more credit to walled gardens than the baseline last click model. And this shows, to me that neither last click nor GA4 DDA model are able to account for the effect of impressions on the walled gardens, and actually in any sort of fashion. And we can also see that results as of Google Organic are overvalued by a lot in GA measurement. The last notable thing here is that the overall changes between GA last click and GA DDA are not very high overall, and they actually range from -11 to +11% only, which then really puts into question if marketers should go through all the hassle of adopting the model in the first place, if it's not really giving them meaningfully different answers. But that's maybe a discussion for another day. For our topic today, the most relevant thing here is that simply GA cannot properly deal well with walled gardens evaluation. Right. So I hope I let that sink enough with you guys. And before we wrap it up today here and jump into Q&A, let me invite Thomas once again to the discussion, sharing with us about how are synthetic impressions helping him and his team Expondo at Expondo already. So Thomas, I see you're back. So let me ask you a couple last questions. We were talking about the need to cut budgets previously because you couldn't prove the effectiveness of Facebook campaigns to your management. So how is that now changing after you have implemented the walled garden solutions?
Okay, so as I mentioned, we needed to cut down the upper funnel campaigns and the campaigns on a few countries. And now when we have the access to the impression-based data, we see that the Facebook is actually more efficient and we can reevaluate the budget for the rest of the year. And this is somewhat a game changer, I would say. Like being on par with other channels, meaning that is profitable on the most of the countries, no matter what's the CPC, if it's higher there or not, we can be present with Facebook channel as well. So we would like to go towards expanding this channel. So there is initial plan. We already talked with the social media team about the capacities to develop this channel. And we want to run some test campaigns. And if we find it as a success, we'll implement it, this impression-based attribution as a baseline attribution model for our social media team.
Right. Yeah. So that's actually, I'm really glad to hear that. I think it's awesome that, you know, you've actually, I know, because, you know, from our cooperation that it's quite a recent thing for you. And for me to hear that already there is a chance, you know, to get more budget for social media, and not only for the sake of budget, but because probably there could be a huge opportunity for you to actually, you know, gain these customers from Facebook, for instance. I'm really glad to hear that that it's already working for you. But maybe also let me ask you, Tomasz, is there, to your knowledge, any other solution on the market that you could have used instead of the synthetic impressions approach that we have at Rolvenue?
Well, actually, we had a plan to implement this Facebook attribution, but the tool is no longer available. And yeah, there is no good workaround for it. At least to my knowledge, there are no other tools that offer such functionality. And at least I don't know about it.
Okay. Yeah, so we're actually glad that we were able to come in with this. Thomas, very last question to you, and thank you very much for being here and spending the time today. How long did it take you to implement this new solution?
Well, from our side, little to no effort because we contact the client success manager, and in a couple of days we had such data in the panel. So
right. So painless, effortless. That's the way to go. That's how we like it. All right, Thomas, thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for being here. And now, you know, to the most important thing, guys. So how can you get your hands on this and solve your walled gardens evaluation once and for all? If you're a current client and you did not get it yet, please contact your client success manager and, you know, let's work on that so that you can reap the benefits the same way that DataArt and Expondo and Thomas already are. If you're new to Rolvenue, you can use this link or you can scan this QR code to set up a free consultation in the coming days. We'll be swift to come back to you and we can, you know, discuss whether this could be of use and benefit to you. And with this, thank you very much for being here today with us. Thank you for spending your valuable time. And now let's have maybe a look at some of your questions.
Yeah, thanks Pavel and Thomas for a great presentation. We've had really quite a lot of questions and probably more than we can get through now. So apologies if we don't manage to cover everything in this session, but we'd be very happy to continue the conversation offline afterwards. I think we should probably start with, there's a couple of clarification ones which are important. So one question was around how do Facebook and TikTok and the other walled garden platforms, how do they actually know about that $100 conversion that you mentioned in the example?
Yeah, so that's actually quite easy, because for most advertisers, let's take Facebook as an example. The advertiser would put a Facebook tracking pixel on their website. So once then the person comes into the website and makes the conversion, then Facebook actually is tracking that and knows that this user made such a conversion. And then it connects this to, you know, the throat of the data that they internally already have on that user. So it's very easy and straightforward, and it's done via the tracking pixels of all of these platforms.
Great. There's a few questions about the AI model and how the attribution actually works. I know there's a long answer to that question, but in terms of a short answer, are you able to explain kind of how the model differs from maybe Markov chains and Shapley values and the general principle of how we then assign value to different touch points?
Yeah. So everything comes down to really, you know, evaluating every single customer journey in the data set. And, you know, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of different journeys. And the model looks at what touch points actually led to those visits. But also the machine learning model looks at other parameters and on-site behavior to actually arrive at better answers. So it also knows, for instance, what was the quality of the visit, how much time did the visit spend on the website, whether it put something into the shopping basket, whether it was only on homepage or it actually went a couple pages deeper, etc. And so on all of these parameters, it learns how does a good quality visit look like, and which visits are actually increasing the probability that a particular journey will end up as a conversion. So this is the underlying principle, where it's all about what is the incremental value of this touch point that was there and is being evaluated.
Great, thanks. A couple of questions on platforms that are covered. Obviously, we mentioned Facebook and TikTok through the course of this with the examples, but could you explain what platforms are currently covered today? And also, is it possible to include organic social impressions as well, or is it limited to paid ads?
Yeah, so in terms of the platforms that we can actually cover, this methodology is brilliant in a way that it almost has no limits. So as long as the platform has a reasonable API and it allows us to download data in a reasonably granular way, then we can actually do it. So to my knowledge, and I can be, I'm not in the nitty-gritty of every single connector that we have, but to my knowledge, we are already working with Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest, and I also believe YouTube and Google Ads. But it has no limits, really. So whether somebody would want to do this with DV360 or something else, it actually should work with anything, which is the brilliance of this method. Now, with organic impressions, I'm also not quite sure. That would all depend on whether these impressions are actually being covered and provided by the platform in their API. If they are, then obviously this methodology can work with them. If they're not, then unfortunately we cannot.
Okay, great. There's a good question. Do we need to set anything up now to start measuring to enable this measurement, or can you look back at campaigns that have already run in the past?
Yeah, that's one of our other great advantages of this approach, that we can also go backwards. Because as I said, there is no tracking pixel that we would need to implement. So if the client or the advertiser already has, well, that's maybe the only requirement. If they have all of these native tracking pixels of these platforms implement it, then we can actually download data backwards into the history, and actually as far as is necessary. We can go 1 year, 2 years, whatever, and then we can reconstruct the customer journeys from there. So there's also a big advantage of this approach.
Cool. There are a couple of questions about granularity. You may have already covered this, but just to make sure it's crystal clear for everybody, how granular can you go with Facebook results, for example? Is it campaign level, or down to ad sets, or down to specific creatives? How does it work?
Yeah, so I think we need to differentiate here how granular we can go in the pairing methodology itself. And there, it's not really about granularity. It's maybe about cardinality. It's about how many dimensions we can actually get, so that we can, in an ideal scenario, only have one instance of conversion for any combination of those parameters. So that's what that is about on the side of the pairing. Now, when you then are talking about how do we work within Rolvenue with Rolvenue results in general, so what granularity we are achieving there, we can go campaign, we can ad group, in some instances even ad set, right? So we can go pretty down granular, and if even more granularity is needed, what we also provide to some customers is something we call raw path export, where we actually are exporting data in a raw level format. So basically, one line of a table is one impression. So every impression and every click, so you can really digest it in a pretty granular way.
Okay, we talked a bit about transactions and purchases on the website. Does this still work if an advertiser only has leads on their website?
Yes. As long as there is any sort of conversion, then and that the conversion is reasonably being tracked within GA or other web analytics, the system or the solution still works. So the short answer is yes, but then it would be good to talk about how exactly are your goals being tracked and how you have that implemented, which is something that we're happy to do on the free consultation.
Yep. There are a couple of questions about how this might relate to marketing mix modeling. So one for you, Pavel, and then one for Thomas as well, if you're able to jump back on. So the first one is, do you see there might be any kind of application of this to an MMM context in terms of the impressions? I'm guessing we have an issue with frequency, maybe that might mean not, but I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, so this is quite fresh to us. We have released it only about 6 weeks ago. So we haven't really thought about the next generation applications. But in general, whether walled garden impressions or not, the combination of ScanmarQED and Rolvenue into one entity, it can actually enhance MMM in a way where the digital channels within MMM can now have much more granularity, because the Rolvenue connectors can provide data with much more frequency and granularity than is typically possible in a normal MMM project. And also maybe worth mentioning then towards the future, as Phil, very well, we want to combine even more the methodologies of MMM, MMTA, which is not something we have ironed out yet, but is definitely on our roadmap for next year.
Yep, sure. And then Thomas, there's a related question for you about marketing mix modeling. Is that something that you've used at Expondo? And I guess the follow-on question is, if yes, then how does Facebook and other walled gardens kind of look in your marketing mix modeling in comparison?
Yeah, happy to answer it. I can say that with the usage of Rolvenue, we actually deconstruct the budget on a very granular level. So we export the campaign country level and so on. And with this data, we add some internal data like elasticity, so to calculate the incrementality of the channels and the data about what new countries you would like to enter and so on. And then we construct a budget out of it. So basically, and we reiterate it a few times a year. So yes, we use it in media in a mixed model, and we use also Rolvenue to get this data on the granular level.
Okay, very good. I think one final question that we had, this was again for Pavel, I think, which is third-party cookies. How is this solution influenced by third-party cookies, if at all?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. And maybe good to provide now only a short answer to this, because with cookies, you know, the long answer is always for 15 minutes. So, and I don't think we have that much time anymore. But the short answer is that, as I already said in the slides, we think this is also a very future-proof way, because this methodology actually is not dependent on third-party cookies. Because if you think of it, it is dependent on two things. One is what the platforms know about their users. And so, for instance, if Facebook is tracking you within their app or a website or whatever, to them, they are collecting first-party data about you as a user because you're using their website or their app. So third-party cookies don't enter the equation here. And then the second part of data that we're collecting is from the website of the client or of the advertiser. And the advertiser, again, is collecting data on his own website. So he's collecting first-party data. So again, third-party data don't actually enter into the equation here. So I think it is yet one more strength of this solution, that it is also future-proof. And whether, you know, Google Chrome is going to sunset the third-party cookies next year, or maybe in 2027, if they keep postponing this decision as they do, it will not affect our results in any way.
Great, thank you. So I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. I know there were a few questions that we didn't manage to get to, so apologies, but we can follow up, happy to follow up afterwards, and we will circulate the recording as well. So with that, thanks to our presenters, to Pavel and to Thomas. Thank you all for your time and your attention. We hope you found it useful and interesting. Please don't forget to sign up for a trial, and if you have any further questions, please do get in touch. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you also from my side. And then let's be in touch. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.